Hello. Oh, very close. Hi, you can hear me. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, we have a couple of people missing, so if you want to spread a little bit, feel free. If they show up, then they get to sit somewhere else. Welcome. My name is Adrian Jeannette. I am the curator of Brunier Art Museum with University Museums. And this was something that I was really excited when I knew there was going to be a new glassblowing studio opening up. That we were going to hopefully be able to partner in something like this, because what we have is what they call encyclopedic glass collection. We have glass made from ancient Roman period to glass made yesterday, and it's a really big part of our collection, and it's something that I love. And so I always love seeing glass made so that people can really understand what happens. And so it's been a great opportunity to have this collaboration. And so tonight, I just want to say thank you to the Student Innovation Center for allowing us to have this space and for supporting us and the exhibition Collecting Craft over at the University Museums at the Brunier Art Museum. If you haven't seen it, there's lots of glass there, so come see it. It's open until July 22nd. And I want to say thank you to Keith Kutz and Dan Black, who is over there working on the live stream, and Dr. Steve Martin, who are allowing this type of collaboration to happen so that we can live stream this event. Because I think glassblowing and seeing it happen really makes you understand how much skill and how exciting it is to make these objects. And so I'm really happy that we can do this, and I hope we can do it more often and have these events and have glass artists come and maybe have those types of collaborations. So I think there's a lot of fun things we can do, and I just want to say thank you for coming, and I think it'll be really great. I'm going to pass it off to Keith now. Oh, you got that.
Yeah, I'm mic'd up. So. All right, I'm going to come over here because I don't think I was on camera back there, and anybody notices it's true. TV does add 20 pounds, so yeah, I'll stand this way. Yeah. Anyway, welcome to the Gaffers Guild. The Gaffers Guild turned 50 years this year. We were officially a club in 1972. So this is our 50th anniversary, and we can't think of a better way to start our official demo season than with you all coming in here and watching this. And thank you to everybody who's watching online as well for joining us on this. So again, just thanking people. We want to thank Iowa State for giving us the use of this space. It's incredibly nice of them to have given that to us and their support over the years. And thank the 4 people that we have here who are actually going to do the demos. I'm just going to have them wave when I call their names. Jacob Wheaton back here, Elizabeth Krenkel, Sarah Church, and Devin, you don't have to wave. So I'm going to just walk you through everything here, and we're saving questions for the end. The people that are watching live stream, I believe, will be keying in questions via chat, but we'll take care of all of those at the end. So be thinking about anything you want to ask, but we'll take those when we finish the demo. So, quick question, and again, for those of you online, sorry I can't see your hands, but who here is here because they have been watching Blown Away on Netflix? Okay, good. So everybody's here because they're truly interested in the Gaffers Guild and live glass, and not just because they saw the drama on TV. Okay, this is good. So what we're going to be doing is making a piece today. It's going to be a fan-fold wavy bowl. And we're going to start out, it's going to be a clear, colorless vase, but we're putting in little bits of cane in here to add some color. And at a certain point in here, we're going to get a bit of glass, and we're going to do a spiral wrap on the piece. So we're going through that right now. Devin has gotten a gather of glass out of our furnace over here. This furnace can hold 450 pounds of molten glass at any given time. And he got a gather of glass on a blowpipe and shaped that up initially, and now he's coming through and just randomly gathering little bits of cane. Cane is can come in a variety of shapes, colors, and it's something that we make ahead of time, and I'm just going to, because I think that the people online can't see this, but you can have a wide variety of colors, sizes of cane. This is stringer cane. It's very thin, white, and then you can have fancy cane that's a compound of multiple strands of pre-pulled cane that have been twisted together, or just solid color cane like this. So the cane is just going to sit in the piece, but as it's blown out, the cane will sort of get a wispy color, a wispy look to it. So it won't be the solid, distinct shape that it is right now. The bowl that he's going to make is going to be similar to this. It may not be this size. But the white bits that are in here, that's the cane that he's picking up right now. So again, for those who are online, he's picking up these little white bits of cane in here, and then we'll be doing a wrap that will add the rest of the color onto the piece after that. Okay, so the unfortunate part of glass blowing is that there's a lot of waiting. So the glass, when it comes out of the furnace, is at 1190 degrees Celsius, but it cools down very quickly. So we have to constantly be going and reheating the glass in a reheating furnace to get it soft again. Also, the cane that he has here, we need to melt that in. We don't want to go back in and get a second gather of glass and have any of this glass fall off in the furnace, because then the next person that comes in, goes in to gather, suddenly gets white cane on their piece when they were expecting colorless glass. So the watching glass blowing on TV, they have the luxury of editing out all of the reheats. But there will be a lot of reheating going on here, and that can be sort of boring, but it's a necessary part of making a glass piece. So Elizabeth over here is getting a bit ready. When they get this piece blown out a little bit, she's going to bring a bit. It's got red glass and yellow glass that have been sandwiched together, and they'll come over, and that's going to be the spiral wrap on the piece. So we'll see a dual color wrap going around the piece. So she's got to get that hot enough that it will flow, but not so hot that it gets out of control when they're trying to wrap it. So Devin, that's one gather or two gathers? Just one? Okay. So we've got two gathers of glass that we're still going to be doing. The wrap going on second gather? Okay. Okay. So he's going to get another gather of glass on top of this, of the colorless glass. And then they will bring the wrap over and put that on. Then he'll get a third gather of glass over that and then blow it out so that it's getting into the finished size. So in addition to reheating, the other thing that we have to do is sit here and wait for the glass to cool. We don't want to go back into the furnace and gather glass when it's too hot. If you do that, what will end up happening is that the glass will literally just stretch off of the pipe and end up in the furnace, and then we have the same problem that we had before, a bunch of white glass or green or blue or whatever it is sitting in the furnace that the next person is going to get really cranky about. So we have to cool it down enough that the glass will stay on the pipe. And also, the colder the glass, the more glass you gather on the piece after that anyway. So this is called stripping. He took a little bit of the glass and stripped it off of the end. Sometimes you don't want to have a big glob of glass on the piece. You want just to get a thinner layer of glass around it. So when it's hot like that, straight out of the furnace, you can just strip it off into a bucket of water, and that gives you still a second gather or third gather, whichever one you're at, but not as much glass as you would have had before. You can see that inside here right now, you can see the cane that he picked up. White is an unusual color in regard to glass blowing because it's the only color that maintains its whiteness, if you will. It maintains its true color when it's heated. Almost all of the other colors that we work with turn orange when they're heated, so it's very difficult to tell what color you actually have on a piece when everything is orange. The hot glass is orange, the color is orange. You see differences in the hue of the orange, but everything is orange. White, on the other hand, you know that it's white because it stays white in the piece. The orange color and everything comes from the addition of metal oxides into the glass. Every color has its own formula and various types of metal oxides that have been added to make that particular color. All of those colors are closely held secrets by the companies that make the color. We don't mix our own color here. We buy our color pre-made and broken up either into frit, which is glass that has been, sorry, I'm not supposed to walk in front of the glory hole, I apologize. Glass that's been ground up and sized, frit 0 being very, very fine, frit 5 being very, very coarse. So we can have frit, or we can have bar color, which is solid color throughout.
Give me a bit.
So Devin is using a tool called a block to help to cool and shape the piece. The blocks are made out of fruit wood. Usually black cherry is the favorite wood. And they're used because they're solid. You get a uniform shape with the piece, but they're a little bit less flexible than using wet newspaper. Wet newspaper you can shape to whatever it is you want. So you'll see Devin switch back and forth between using the block and using the newspaper depending on what part of the project that he's working on. The newspaper's kept wet. Usually it's about 10 layers of newspaper that's been folded into sixths. So ends up being about 60 layers of newspaper. Once we get it wet, we're literally half an inch or less away from 2,000 degree glass with your hand. It's a little bit intimidating to the new glass blowers, but it's a really great way to make sure that we get good contact with the piece. So they're doing a wrap on the piece. Elizabeth brought that hot bit, which was red and yellow color, and brought it back. Devin touched it to the piece, and as he turned and rotated, the glass pulled off the bit that Elizabeth brought and spiraled around the piece. Now he has to go in and get that heated up because that bit is cold relative to the rest of the glass, and he wants to be able to melt that in. So he'll come back and shape that up some more, probably marver it a little bit to get that smooth. If we don't smooth it in and gather over it, you're likely to capture some bubbles, and you'll see bubbles traveling around the spiral of the piece. Sometimes that's desirable, sometimes it's not. In this particular case, I don't think we want to see bubbles. So he's going to heat that up, marver it. This is called a marvering table, so he's marvering and smoothing that glass down. And he'll go back and heat and reheat until the glass is pretty much completely uniform and there's no texture to the piece. So depending on the colors and everything else, this can take quite a while to do this. Heat is our friend in here, and the more experienced you are as a glass blower, the easier you can heat. You're more confident in leaving it in the glory hole, the reheating furnace, longer. And you can shape the piece and get it finished. Beginners are a little heat averse, and so they spend more time out trying to do this when it's too cold. And it's one of the things that we have to teach everybody as we're teaching them glass blowing, is to have confidence in themselves to get a lot of heat into the piece. It saves a lot of time once they get that. But it's just one step out of dozens that they have to remember to do every time that they are making a piece. So beginning glass blowers spend a lot of time making small, simple pieces, nothing like this, and concentrating on developing what we would call muscle memory, constantly turning the piece to keep it centered so that it doesn't flop off, remembering where your hand is supposed to be so you don't grab hold of metal that's very hot. Knowing how to blow and when to blow and how hard to blow. There's all kinds of things that beginning glass blowers have to remember, and it's a challenge at times. So again, he's blocking it, but at the same time he's blowing. He's using what's called a hosepipe extender. It allows him to sit there at the bench, blow through the piece, and not have to have somebody else on the other end blowing through the pipe and him telling them blow harder, blow softer, stop, whatever. He can control everything himself by using that hosepipe extender. Bench blowing is an art form when you have a partner to do that. It's a real challenge for communication when you've got a new person that you're working with. So if anybody does ever go out and watch the Netflix show Blown Away, you'll see that there are new people working with the artists every week, and those people have to learn what that artist wants. And it can be a challenge when you put a new assistant when you're used to working with somebody else for a long time. The hosepipe extender sort of takes some of that away. All right, so it looks like we're going in for gather 3. Each gather, as you see, gets more and more glass on the piece. Some glass blowers will get up to 7, 8, 9, 10 gathers of glass. It's entirely possible to have 10 or 20 pounds worth of glass sitting out on the end of that pipe. And you can imagine just how heavy that feels when you're not able to grab hold of it right out at the end where that hot glass is. And you have to keep your hands back a ways. That's one reason why we use that pipe cooler over there. That allows the glass blower to cool the blowpipe down so they can get their hands closer to the glass. But still, on a very large piece, even a piece like this, that probably has about 2 pounds, pound and a half, 2 pounds of glass on there, but it probably feels like 5 or 6 pounds when you're holding it back and the weight of that's just coming down. So that'll be the last gather of clear that he puts on there, or colorless glass that he puts on there. So now he's going to concentrate on blowing the bubble, and you'll be able to watch that bubble start to grow and expand. And then he'll use probably the newspaper, alternating again with a block to get that to the size and shape that he wants. So this is the last stage of the piece before we're ready to transfer the piece so that he can open it up into the bowl. But there's a number of steps that he still has to go through. He has to get the bubble blown out far enough, but he also needs to have a way for this to break off. And he needs to put what's called a jack line in here. This tool that we have right here is called a jack. And he's going to be using this to squeeze a groove into the glass. He's not actually cutting it with this tool, but he's squeezing a groove in. and that's where the piece will break off. So Sarah's protecting his forearm right now with a wooden paddle. It's just protecting his forearm from the radiant heat coming off of that glass. The larger the piece, the more it radiates over. So a small paperweight, not so bad. You may feel a little heat on your hand, but not so much up on your forearm. But as this piece gets larger and larger, he's going to start feeling that heat more and more on his forearm. So we use a shield or a paddle to protect his skin. This is why it's very difficult for a person to blow solo. When you're making some of these pieces like this, it's very difficult for an artist to do all of this by themselves. It's always nice to have a team of people, somebody to open doors, somebody to shield your hand or your arm for heat, somebody to bring you bits, find tools that you may have forgotten to set out or are in the wrong place. Here in our club, we do have a rule that you can't blow solo. We always have to have a qualified glassblower working with you. It's a safety issue, but it also allows people to build teamwork and get used to working with other people. There are still a few glassblowers who do blow solo. Some of you may have been out to Art Saccati's studio just west of Ames. He blows solo most of the time. Occasionally I go out and help him, but most of the week he's blowing by himself. And he's built a lot of tools and a lot of helpers to let him do some of the things that people are doing in our studio. So Devin is working on that jack line. He's squeezing that groove in. And that groove is going to be, again, where the piece breaks off, but he still needs to expand the bubble some more. The glass is very thick right now. Devin is one of the people, in fact, everybody in this group is working on thin glass. Some of us work in much thicker glass. These guys are all working on Venetian glassware. Making goblets, and that requires blowing very, very thin glass. And it's a skill that they have been working on for quite a while. Sarah's only been working on it for a few months. In fact, she's only been blowing glass for a few months and is already way ahead of most of the people in the club. But it's a skill that the Venetian glass blowers have developed over, several hundred years, and these guys have been working on it for, several months, and they're getting pretty good. But a lot of us work in thicker glass, and it's a little bit more forgiving. So he's continuing to expand the piece, making it larger. He's using the newspaper at this point to constrain how the bubble grows. So you'll see he's rotating the newspaper out onto the end of the piece. That's allowing that part of the glass to stay a little bit cooler, and also forcing the air to expand out to the side where the piece is getting wider. And he's already to the point now where he has to have the doors for the reheating furnace open to be able to get that piece through. And it's also at a critical point. He has to watch that he doesn't let this get too cold at this point. As it blows out, the glass cools faster. So by working on it, as the glass gets thinner, he has to heat it more frequently, but not for as long a period of time. The thin glass heats up faster, but it cools down faster as well. So now he's balancing heat and shape to make sure that the piece doesn't get too cold. It's also a risk when it gets thinner that if he overheats it in the reheating furnace, the whole piece can collapse. So this is where part of the skill of glass blowing comes in, is knowing how hot to keep it. And it's something that beginning glass blowers, is just one more thing that we're throwing at them that they have to remember to do when they make a piece. So we're getting close to transferring this piece. Transferring is taking it off of the blowpipe where he's been, and putting it onto a solid rod called a punty. The punty, once it's attached to that, the opening where it broke off will be away from the glass blower, and that's where they'll work on then expanding the opening of the piece. So if we want to get the shape of that wavy bowl that we have, you've got to be able to open it up. So that's what they're working on here. Or actually, are you putting a foot on right now? Sorry, I'm one step away. They're actually going to put a foot on the bottom of this piece, a piece of glass on the bottom that will serve as a base for the piece. That does a couple things. It's decorative, but it also gives the glass blower a more solid amount of glass to stick the punty to when they transfer it. So this is called a cookie foot because it's dropped on the marver, and it pretty much looks like a cookie there, very hot cookie. He tries to get it centered on the piece. Most of us don't do as well at centering it on the piece as what Devin just did. Mine are always off to the side. And so now Devin is going to take the paddle here, and while, Jacob is using the paddle while Devin is using the jacks to keep the piece away from the foot away from the piece, but also keeping the bottom of the foot flat. So it's a little hot. Devin's going to spot cool it right in the center of the piece. He doesn't want to attach the transfer punty to a really hot foot. The transfer punty will fuse to the piece and make it difficult to break off at the end, but also he doesn't want it to be too soft. What he's going to end up doing on this transfer is putting a tiny bit of glass up onto that foot that he made and breaking it off. So that little interface of glass that's going to be about 3/4 of an inch wide is all that's going to be holding that piece onto the punty. So he needs to, again, control the heat so that when Jacob brings that to him and attaches it, both of the pieces are at an appropriate temperature to get a skin of glass holding it together, but not fuse the glass between the punty and the foot. So Devin's going to flash the piece, just warm that up a little bit. Jacob is reheating the bit, the punty bit, just to make sure that it's good and hot. And when they're both comfortable with the temperature of their respective pieces, they'll bring them together and transfer the piece from the pipe to the punty. So Devin is in control. He grabs hold. All that Jacob is doing is supporting the punty. He's not doing anything other than making sure that it stays in line with the pipe and the piece. Devin is adjusting it so that it's perfectly centered. And when he's happy with this, he's going to cool the jack line a little bit, lift this up onto the rail of the bench. He's adding a little bit of water just to fracture that jack line a little. But then he'll lift that up and tap it. And there you go. So that was a successful transfer. They transferred it off of the pipe onto the solid punty. So now Jacob will heat this up. The part where it broke off is quite cold compared to the rest of the piece. He needs to get that into the glory hole right away so that it doesn't crack. And now hand it back off to Devin. This is where the light touch now begins. If you notice when Jacob brought that over, he set it down on the rail very, very gingerly, very gently. If at this point, if the punty gets too cold, if he sets that down too hard, the piece is going to be on the floor. And that happens more often than we'd like to admit, but it does happen. So he has to keep, again, we talk about heat balance. He has to keep the transfer point where it's attached hot enough that it stays soft and somewhat flexible, but cold enough that it doesn't, again, fuse to the bottom of the piece. All while he's trying to heat the opening and heat the opening enough that he can start opening the piece up. So this is another place where glass blowing gets a little challenging for beginners, but somebody like Devin, who's been blowing for 15 years or so, you know, this is pretty simple for him. So sometimes you have somebody else heat for you. That's what the assistants are for. But sometimes you need to just do it yourself so that you're 100% in control of what you're doing. So now he's using the jacks not to put a jack line in, but to start to open the piece. So if you can see it, he's taken an opening that was about 3/4 of an inch, and now he's opened it up to about a 3-inch opening. And he's going to continue to open this up. To make a wavy bowl like what we have, you need to get the sides out at least 90 degrees, so you're in a cylinder, or preferably slightly flared out. And what will end up happening after that is they're going to heat it up and start to turn it. And they're going to start spinning it, and they'll spin it out, and as the glass gets soft and heats up, it'll start spinning out wider and wider, and then they'll take it out, hold it upside down, and it will fold down into those waves. But he needs to get this open up a lot further right now before we're ready to do that. So by proper heating, he was able to open that up. And now he's going to actually move over to this other glory hole and open that up, because it's a larger one. This one's 18 inches in diameter. The one he's been working on is 12 inches in diameter. So he needs the added room inside the piece for this piece to spin out. This is, again, where it's nice to have several people helping. So Elizabeth and Sarah are able to help control the doors as Devin goes in. And when he needs to, they'll open the inner doors as well and open that quite wide. So he's going to continue to rotate it so that it doesn't, the grooves or the waves in there stay in place until it's solid enough that the piece won't move. But he's also in a hurry to get it off of that pipe and into the annealing oven. Nice job. So the piece is now sitting in an annealing oven, and it will be in there for at least 24 hours. If you set that piece out on the counter to cool, it would crack in a matter of a couple of minutes. So when it goes into the annealing oven, it allows the piece, all of the stress that he put into that piece gets to work its way out in the annealing oven, and then it's brought down at a controlled rate to ambient temperature. And then he'll be able to open up the doors and see the finished piece. So in glass blowing, you never know what you're going to get until some period of time afterward. If anybody's been over to Bernier, and give a little plug to the museum, there's a piece over there by Josh Simpkins. It's called a planet. It's a solid ball about 10 inches in diameter. That sat in the annealing oven for, I believe, about 6 months. because of the thickness and the sheer mass of the glass, the annealing oven allows the glass to become the same temperature from the very inside to the out. And when you're putting it in there, it's not at an equilibrium temperature. If you just brought it back out, it would cool from the outside, but the inside would still be really hot and trying to expand, and the piece would break. So for an artist like Josh, his pieces take a long time to sit in the annealing oven so that he doesn't end up having them cracked. So while we'll be able to see this in 24 hours, yeah, we don't have to wait 6 months to see the final product. So once again, give everybody here a hand. They did a great job. So I think we're at Q&A time.
Yes, sorry, that took a second. Time for questions. So who has a question? Anyone here? Sure. You can try saying it in, but I might repeat it.
Yeah, so none of you guys are wearing any protective gear besides the glasses. I'm a klutz. I seem like I would be poking people with that thing all the time and keeping people's spear burns. So how do you guys mitigate that?
So no, it's a very good question. Part of what we do in the studio at the outset, when a beginning glassblower comes in, we don't start blowing glass right away. We cover safety. So we try to tell people to wear protective equipment. This is a Kevlar sleeve. It will help to protect your skin from heat. Some glassblowers will wear gloves. We encourage, especially beginning glassblowers, to wear layers so they can wear a long sleeve shirt while they're blowing glass, take it off when they're not blowing glass to cool down a little bit. But yes, it's a constant concern in here of heat. We tell people, assume that anything that's metal is hot, and anything that isn't metal will cut you. And that's sort of the mantra. We have to constantly be watching what we're doing so that we don't end up with a burn accident. And different people have different sensitivities to heat. So those of us who have been doing this for a while, I don't know, you sort of develop a tolerance that most of the beginners don't have.
Another thing that helps also is the fact that we have the assistants and stuff as well. Like that's one of the biggest jobs of an assistant, is doing whatever the person who's blowing glass needs. And at that point, as you saw several times, there was just times where somebody would be holding a paddle, just keeping the heat away from Devin's hand. And that's also just a really important part of being an assistant, and getting the door at the furnace, and that really helps to mitigate some of those issues.
Great question.
Other questions? Sure.
So I had a question about the furnace. So what's in there? I know it's like the molten glass, but how much did you put? Is there a ratio, or what's there?
No, it's an excellent question.
Yeah.
So this
what is in the furnace is the question.
So this is the science part of the demonstration. So the glass that's in the furnace is a mixture of primarily quartz sand, so silica sand. It also has a number of things like soda ash, limestone, calcium hydroxide, feldspar, barium carbonate, dolomite, potash, blah, blah, blah. Lots of different things. What we had in the old studio was what's called batch. It's all of those minerals that have been ground up, and it's just sort of a granular powder, and I won't open it up. But that's what this was. A number of years ago, we decided to start buying what's called cullet. It's pre-melted glass. This comes from the Czech Republic. We're buying glass from the Czech Republic right now. It's been pre-melted, and this is what we throw into the furnace. This has a lot of moisture in it, and it creates a lot of bubbles. So it gets very fizzy inside the furnace, and we have to wait for those bubbles to rise to the top and pop. This glass that we put in melts much quicker, far fewer bubbles, and lets us work with the glass in about 4 hours, as opposed to this, which might be 6 or 8 hours before it's ready to work.
Another thing that's important about the fact that we use cullet as well is the fact that batch like this is actually a really fine powder, so it's actually kind of dangerous to use, and you have to have a respirator to actually use
definitely
this.
Don't want to be breathing
rather than using respirators for everybody that's filling the furnace with glass, we use cullet, and that prevents us from needing to do that. It's a lot safer.
The other thing that we do, if you notice the break-off bins over here, one's for color and one's for clear. We recycle as much of the glass as we can back into the furnace. So if a person's working in clear glass or colorless glass, break it off in there, and all of that will go back into the furnace. We probably put close to 100 to 150 pounds of that glass back into the furnace every week. And this stuff costs $1.50 a pound. So we're saving ourselves an awful lot of money by recycling the glass. The colored glass, what people don't scavenge to put into another piece, ends up going into the City of Ames glass recycling program. So it does not end up in a landfill as far as we know. It's again something that we're trying to do to minimize our environmental footprint in here.
Sure. Next question.
This is about the ovens. From a cold temperature, like room temperature, to what it is now. How long does that take, and how long do you maintain that temperature?
Okay.
How hot is the oven, and how long does it take to get there?
So we have two different sizes of glory hole, and so the smaller one actually heats up a lot faster than the larger one.
About 30 minutes.
Yeah, it takes about 30 minutes to heat up the smaller one, about an hour or so to heat up the larger one, 45 minutes
or so, yeah. The furnace, on the other hand, runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We never want to shut the furnace down. So it's a highly efficient furnace, very well insulated. It has what's called a recuperator on it, so we're taking some of the waste heat and preheating our combustion air so that it's very efficient on that. But if we had to start the furnace up from scratch, it would take about a week because we have to bring it up very, very slowly.
So there's an oven and there's a furnace?
Yep, there's the furnace right here that contains the molten glass. And then these are reheating furnaces or glory holes. These are turned off when we're not using them. We don't need to be wasting natural gas. And then there's annealing ovens over here. So the terminology sort of gets confusing as we talk about furnaces and reheating furnaces and ovens. We know what we're doing, but we sometimes forget that other people don't get the terminology. Thank you.
Those actually take the longest to heat up of all the things. So the annealing ovens, even though they only go to about 518 degrees Celsius, those take about an hour.
They're the only electric appliance that we have in here. Everything else is natural gas.
For those, do you adjust the temperature?
Yeah. It's a predetermined temperature. The glass that we use, the manufacturer of this glass specifies what temperature to anneal this glass at, and also the profile that we use to ramp down as we're cooling the glass down. Depending on the thickness of the maximum thickness of a piece will determine whether it's a faster profile or a slower profile. The thinner the pieces, the faster we can cool it down.
So I have a quick online question. How different, what is the process for mass-produced glass bottles and things of that sort?
Okay, so the glass itself is typically, it's a similar type of glass. It's also a sodium lime-based glass. But the difference in manufactured glass versus handmade glass is the artistic quality. Everything in a manufactured environment is blown, metered amounts of glass are blown into a mold, so they know exactly how much glass is being put in there. They know exactly how much air is being used to expand the glass in the mold. Everything is automated and very, very much uniform. what we're doing here, every piece that we make, no matter how much we will try to duplicate a piece and make two pieces that are identical to each other, it's nearly impossible because of difference in how much we gather, and how we work through the final piece. Also, manufactured glass often does not have any bubbles in it because they are able to, they have far larger furnaces and tanks of glass than what we do. And that's a mark of hand-blown glasses, that you'll often find tiny little bubbles in the glass, and that's just a natural occurrence from the way that our glass melts. Manufactured glass will also often have seams in it. As you look on a bottle, you'll see a line that comes up, on either sides because of where it goes into the mold. We don't use molds in our studio, so everything that we have won't have any kind of a seam in the glass.
Other questions in here? Hi.
How did you get involved in blowing glass, and how can people get involved?
Excellent question. So I'm going to let these guys talk about that.
Yeah, so I got involved. Actually, my brother told me about the club when I first got to Iowa State, and that was actually right before the studio shut down.
The old studio.
Yeah, the old studio shut down. So I got to blow glass for about a month and decided that this was something that I really, really enjoyed. And so I actually stuck with it. And that was during my undergrad, and now I'm doing my PhD as well here, and so I just decided to stay with it. But I find glass to be a really cool medium to work in. I also do research on glass, so I'm kind of really biased towards it. I think it's an excellent material that people kind of just disregard, because most of the time you're literally looking right through it and not paying any attention to it. You're most likely interested in what's behind it. But glass itself is a really versatile material that is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
So that's how I got involved with it and stayed with it.
Hand
But
Sarah
Sure.
the mic. Yeah.
for how to get involved, though, quick, while I have the floor. So we hold classes basically twice a semester currently. They're 6 weeks long. And so we right now are training 7 people right now, and actually starting, do we have a new member meeting next week, or is it the week after?
Next week, next Tuesday.
Yeah, next Tuesday we have a new member meeting for people who are interested, and that's open to students, non-students, community members. And so we'll just basically meet and then set up some new classes for the second half of the semester. And actually 3 of us, so Devin and I lead a course, and then Keith also has a course that or a class that he teaches.
And we've got a couple of other instructors, 2 other groups of instructors that are going to be teaching the second half of the semester as well. So I'm hoping we'll actually be able to train about 16 people second half of this semester, and then we'll do the same thing in summer and then on in the fall. It's just a continuous thing, but it depends on how many people we have that are qualified to teach. We don't want typically beginning glassblowers to have the pressure of coming in and trying to teach. So
we also do like very, it's a very, the student to teacher ratio is 2 to 1, so it's a very intense, you get a lot of time to actually
a lot of time in front of the furnace, yeah. So yeah, Sarah has an interesting story about how she got involved, so I'll let her tell that.
Yeah, so I am a freshman this year, my first year in undergrad. I'm an art major, and I heard about the club the year before I came in.
Yeah,
Wait, what?
just walk away.
Sorry, Jacob. Okay. So I heard about the club the year before I was actually looking at colleges, and I heard it from a friend who was here while the building had just been finished right before COVID hit, when everybody went virtual. And so as I came to visit, to just do a college visit and visit him while he was here, we came in and just looked at the window because the building was closed, and I was super, super interested because I've always wanted to blow glass. I've been going to a studio near my grandparents' house since I can remember, and always looking at demos wherever we go, visit on vacations and stuff. So the fact that it was a club available to students was actually one of the deciding factors in choosing the school for me. And so being able to come in and do it my first semester at school was definitely awesome. And I'm really looking forward to eventually getting to a level where I can teach a class. And that's just kind of my main goal.
Yeah, it won't be long.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Devin has been blowing for quite a while.
I have.
Yeah. Go for it.
So I did my undergraduate here at Iowa State and then worked in industry for about 6 years. And I started as, not my first semester, but second semester as a freshman, my first time, and then have kept up the glassblowing since, finding a club that I spent the weekends at, or not club, studio that I spent the weekends at while I was working, and then I'm back here for a graduate degree, and I've helped open up this studio and continued working in here.
Yeah,
So.
Devin has been the third person in our group. He knows more about how this stuff operates than any of the rest of us, so he's been a huge help in both getting the studio started and continuing on operation. So, and then Elizabeth?
Yeah, so I just, as a kid, I always really enjoyed watching glassblowing demos whenever I would go to like historical recreations or just anywhere that I could watch that. And then I ended up here for grad school without knowing anything about it. And somebody in my program was able to do it and told me about it. And I started blowing glass about a year and a half ago, and it's been great ever since.
Yeah. So yeah, we were fortunate to have a studio here. Like I said, this is our 50th year of being a club. But about 4 years ago, when they were doing the planning for this building, our old studio, which was in Old Sweeney Hall, for anybody who remembers Old Sweeney, got shut down. So we went about 4 years, 3.5 years without a studio. And we were taking students into the club. We needed to maintain our student membership. So Elizabeth was one of the people that we took up to a glassblowing studio in Minnesota, up in Minneapolis. It's a community studio up there. And we taught her on a crash course weekend how to do the fundamentals. But then she had to wait, another year and a half before this opened up so that you could relearn it all over again. So, but it was fun. And I've been doing this for about 20 years now, 22 years off and on. I've been in the studio continuously, but I have a real job. I have to actually work during the day and play at glass in the evenings.
Well, and I will say that, knowing glass artists who have to teach, because that's what you have to do as an artist often, to have a studio without a glass program is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That's not the norm, so we're really lucky to have that.
Yeah.
And most glass studios are in colleges that have glass blowing programs, and so this is kind of an anomaly, which is amazing to some people.
Yeah.
And not normal, but in a great way that we have this opportunity that anyone can do it too, because even if you have a glass blowing studio and you're teaching, it's people who are learning how to do it.
Right.
It's students in glassblowing, not so much just every day, hey, I'm interested in this.
Yeah,
and so it's a great opportunity and that we can have here.
Yeah, we're really fortunate that we can open up our classes to not just students at the university, but faculty, staff, and community members as well. That's a pretty unusual model for a public university. That's something you normally see at a privately operated studio. So it's been great. It's worked for 50 years. I hope it'll work for another 50 years.
Absolutely.
I won't be here, but
maybe you will.
Yeah, probably not.
90 years old.
Yeah, it'd be a
Blowing
little
glass.
more than that. But yeah. Thank you, but.
You're welcome. Any other questions? It is 6:28, so I can take another question if anyone has one before. No? Okay, well, I really thank you so much for all coming. I really appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you guys showing up and doing this. I know it takes some of your own private time, and we really appreciate it, and it's great to see.
Yeah, and thanks again to University Museums. It's been a good experience in working through this, and again, hopefully we can do a lot more.
Yeah.
And we will be arranging a tour of Bernier. So.
If you want to see any Venetian glass, we got some out, and we've also got very heavy, large contemporary glass and a whole bunch of other types of glass. So,
So.
in the museum, come on over. Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much.